Hey there, church. Today we're wrapping up our mini-series about the disciple Peter. If you have not yet watched the last two devotionals, I would strongly encourage you to go back and listen to those first. In part one, we talked about Peter and how he was always the first one to speak up. Sometimes he spoke with great wisdom, and sometimes he said things that were laughably wrong. We also talked about the promise that Jesus gave Peter. He said things like Peter will be the rock on which he builds his church, and that he would give him the keys to the kingdom of heaven. These words are not light words. This is a promise of authority that Jesus is placing over Peter. Something we must know about God's promises is they are often contingent on one thing: our faithfulness to the Lord. And even then, God always prefers to delay a promise rather than revoke it. For example, the Israelites were only meant to be in the wilderness for 11 days, but it turned to 40 years when they continued to choose disobedience. But even through delays, God still somehow seemed to fulfill his promise at the best time possible. So where do we see Peter's promise fulfilled? In Acts chapter 2, all of the believers are meeting together, 50 days after Jesus ascended into heaven. At this time, they were all filled with the Holy Spirit. I imagine that all of the disciples were at a loss for what to do. But then Peter stands up and begins preaching to the crowd. Verse 37 says that Peter's words pierced their hearts. Yes, the same Peter who cut off the ear of a servant. Yes, the same Peter who was rebuked by Jesus himself. The same Peter who talks so much in Matthew chapter 17 that it literally caused God the Father to speak down from the heavens saying, "Peter, listen to my son Jesus. He is the one talking." Despite his mistakes, God kept his promise with Peter, and it was fulfilled that day when the church began by more than 3,000 people being saved. What if Peter would have allowed his mistakes to disqualify him from God's promise? We simply might not have church today without him. If God has given you a promise, you can have joy today because our God is a promise keeper. He does not change his mind. He knows your heart and he knows your intentions. Even though you may have experienced delay in your journey, God has not revoked his promise to you. He will fulfill his promises.